Good. I just can't quit looking at it. It looks great.
Yeah. Hey, welcome to Shop Talk Tuesday, and guess what? Drop by. We got a Mr. Bradley, the legend, the myth legend himself. And if you've seen any of my videos with him, you know he's just a well of information. And also the video that we just did over the Fairlight bike build, that was Kevin's, was dropped last Wednesday, or no, sorry, Sunday. I don't know what day it is. So you'll find those links below after this stream. But you can always look at my library and find other videos that I have. But hey, today is Tuesday and we're talking Shop Talk, and what a great plethora of knowledge this guy has. And doing that video as he was driving down from the great north of Minnesota, he was thinking in his head like, maybe we should talk about the fit a little bit more, to kind of recap or rebuttal, if you will, in a sense of a couple other conversations we had since the video dropped about fit and how fit is the most and foremost important part of your bike.
Right.
So without further ado, we'll talk about that. But before that, we will, my local sponsor, if I can find that. Where is it? Where to go?
Guy Bicycles, hanging with the guy. Hey, I'm Justin, the guy in the garage. I do have a garage shop, and you see most of these tools behind me. I want to do a shout out to Jensens USA, which you'll find a link below if you're looking for some good pricing and as well tools to fit or to expand your actual shop at home.
Nice light bike.
Just give you a little insights. Jenson's a great place to get tools like from Park and as well other bikes and parts and accessories. Where I found chains and cassettes and all those kinds of things have not been affected by price changes yet. So they still have a lot of parts and also bikes on sale at Jensens USA. And they ship pretty quick. Anything's free over $50 for shipping. So check them out. That's where I get most of my stuff. Also have an affiliate link down below in the description. And let's talk about fit.
Before that, I have had quite a few good experiences with Jensen as well, so I would recommend them as well.
Oh, good. Oh, well, out of the blue. Yeah, I've been working with them. I remember back in the day, Jensen's used to be just a wholesaler direct to the bike shops. And then they converted and went direct to consumer before everybody went to direct to consumer. But in any case,
everything changes.
Yeah, everything changes. So, yeah. We have a live and we have chat, so if you have any questions for myself or John, definitely jump in, and then we'll go about that. But fit first. Fitting is a huge thing. We've been fitting bikes for decades, and we were talking about the Fairlight and the fitting, and taking away kind of I would say the scariness of buying a frame specific to be shipped to you, because you can't really throw your leg on it and that kind of thing. So what kind of insights you suggest for getting a fit or being fitted, and how important it is to work with these companies to get the right frame sent to you?
Sure. So one thing I want to go back a little bit to our previous video. We talked a few times like you can spend a lot of money on fit. The bottom line is fit helps you ride better, helps you either just for more comfort or more performance or whatever. There definitely is value. There is a wide range of fitting out there, everything from, hey, stand over that bike to people doing basically full body scans. So, what it leads you to is a bike that basically becomes part of you, and if you are riding a bike now and you are uncomfortable, then that's something you can take to a good reputable bike shop and somebody knows what they're doing. So, we've trying to think where we should back up and start from here.
Well, with the fitting, we were talking about getting professional fits done and the value of that. For me, and from coming from Parker Bikes, we did a lot of entry-level riders. And really, the upper end fits sometimes doesn't really translate to be necessary right out of the gate, but some kind of fitting is. And that's where I kind of was like, well, it's kind of expensive and so forth. But if you're an avid cyclist, give us like the elevator pitch of how those fits are important. And second, how can they be translated to buying a custom frame or a frame from like Farlight, as we talked before? Or not Farlight, Fairlight. I'm so bad.
Farmer, man. So you know, fit is just like, you know, if you know what size, it's like you're going to buy a new pair of jeans and you know what size, you're going to buy something that fits your waist, your inseam, that type of thing. It's much, you kind of wear your bicycle. So this, you know, think about it that way. Getting a good fit at a shop is key, particularly, you know, as you're investing in a bike, whether it's, you know, somewhere, you know, maybe your first bike, or maybe it's something like a Fairlight where you're like, man, I've been riding forever. Those look awesome. So the nice thing about it is you can find somebody, typically you can find somebody even online that can help you. There's a lot of local resources for that, particularly here in Colorado, because we're swimming in high performance bike shops and stuff like that. The main thing you want is somebody you're comfortable with, you know, who you've you know, one, recognize them. It's much like going to, you know, see a doctor or something like that. You want to see them. But what you will find, the thing I like to describe about a good fit is your bike starts to disappear underneath you, and that it becomes part of you, and you're not fighting the bike. So if you're having painful issues, knee issues, butt issues, back, shoulder issues, a lot of times that can be resolved through bike fit. It is not a cure-all. Like if you actually have an issue, you know, an old injury or something like that, then that's something else. But you know, at a you know, basic level, it helps you buy the right bike that works best with who you are, you know, in terms of your fit. In terms of Fairlight, I talked to Kevin a couple of times about it. He said they were wonderful to deal with. Kevin has had fitting before, you know, so he's got like a cheat sheet
with all the specs.
and Fairlight said, send us that information. They are a wealth of information. They know how to fit you as best as they can from the UK. And we were talking before about they have 2 frame sets. You'd say, for me, I would probably be, I think it's a 58. You know, the issue with me would, do I take a 58R, which is regular, or 58 tall? And you talked about how it's the head tube is a little bit longer, and the top tube is a little bit shorter to get you in a more upright position. So I'm a huge believer in it. I think it can protect your investment. That's the Sherwood Forest call from the UK. I don't know if that you guys heard that. Yeah, I'm a total believer. You know, when I started in bike shops back in the 70s, you know, you just would say, hey pal, stand over that bike, you know. And it's funny too, I'm sure you've seen it with some of your customers bringing their old bikes from the 70s. Typically we were fitting too large. You know, like somebody, in fact, I think my first really nice bike was close to a 25-inch frame, and now I ride something which is more close to a 23, 24-inch frame. So it's just a good thing, and it enhances your ride, and there is a lot of value to it. Obviously, you don't need to go crazy. There's a lot of resources out there. It's kind of like buying a suit. You can find somebody walking into a department store, and they may have somebody who's a great fitter for a suit. Or you may say, I'm going to throw down, I want to, you know, buy an Armani or something like that. I'm going to go to a tailor full on. Obviously your price level is going to move up, but you don't need to break the bank. So.
Well, there's several apps out there that do fittings where you set up on a tripod with your camera and do like the spin kind of thing, and it does like kind of part of that capturing. It's kind of the watered down version of that. But if you can vet a fitter in your area that is not, you know, it fits the price point that you're looking for, and they also have a follow-up fitting service. I mean, it's kind of like you buy into it, and then they'll do a refitting. So, for example, like if you got fitted and you don't have the bike yet, and you're like, okay, this is the measurements, and you send that information to the frame company to have the frame built or make those decisions, like for Fairlight, and have that sent over. And once it's built up, then maybe refit it again to make sure all those bits are right on there. This is so important, and it's been such a kind of a soreness in the industry currently that there's a company in England where they were just a fitting service, and now they're branching out to make a business of carrying bike frames, and then you can customize what groups and so forth. But the most important part is if you give them the fit information, they'll give you the right crankset right out of the bat, the correct bars, the width, the stems, the saddles, and all that. You buy that all up front, versus buying a bike off the rack and then have to do all those part swaps later, which can get really expensive. So even though you might be paying a little bit more for that, but you're getting a customized bike right out of the box. And I'm not sure if they're going to be shipping it, you know, I'm not, they're just, I don't even think they're launched yet as a company, but it's a great concept. And therefore it's a great opportunity for that.
And one thing, if you're new to cycling or whatever, one thing to think about is, so this bike here is a specialized frame set. It does have a specialized bar and stem, but with this bike you can put any brand of bar and stem on there. It's not like you know, a car where you have to have Ford or Nissan parts or whatever.
Yeah.
So that allows you some flexibility. It's kind of an interesting thing at the upper end now. They're going to where they actually have one piece bar stem combos, which is great if you ride for a pro team or you got a big bank account.
Yeah.
Because if your bike comes with a integrated stem bar combo, you know, hope to gosh it fits. If it doesn't, you're into, you know, the replacement money. But a lot of the parts on your bike you can do all sorts of crazy things with it. You can completely change the character of your bike. It's that interchangeable, except as you get into some of the upper end product.
Yeah, and that is true today. But yes, when you get into upper end, you're pretty much pigeonholed to have that stem bar combo from that brand and so forth, which can get kind of pricey. Which pushes us to vintage versus new. You know, I do a lot of refurbished bikes from road and so forth, and I'm like a little pig in a pig pen, just enjoying myself when I do that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, this is great. Where do we change from this? But when we talked about basically Fairlight's Reynolds tubing, I wanted to talk about, we're going to transition to the actual steel portion of this. And combination of this steel frame here, this is from Columbus, and I shot a picture to John when he was up in Minnesota, and I was like, what do you know about Columbus? And it was like, whoo, it's not a text got back, it was definitely a phone call. So I'm like, oh, here we go. So in any case, we talked about the Reynolds. Let's kind of recap on the Reynolds tubing and what we just talked about and the Fairlight. You know, your little bit of, you know, elevator pitch of your experience with working with Reynolds, and probably just to kind of, you know, get insights of how long they've been used. And you had like a faux pas when you were talking about working at Trek, and you were talking about the Reynolds guy coming in, and you weren't doing Reynolds, but yet technically you were doing Reynolds in the 90s. So.
I think now that I'm back in the higher altitude, lower oxygen, I managed to forget that when I was at Trek, I was the road bike product manager for both Trek and Le Mans. And Le Mans, we had a lot of great frame sets out there with Reynolds tubing. So I actually spec'd bikes with Reynolds tubing. It's great stuff. So yeah, that was a bit of a faux pas.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned earlier, you said this is a frame from Columbus. I want to kind of back on that. So it's actually, this is a Specialized design frame. So Specialized did the design, the top tube lengths, head tube lengths, all that type of thing. Yeah. Working with Columbus, they say, here's what we want. And, you know, any of these higher end tubing manufacturers, Columbus and or Reynolds, can, you know, kind of modify this tubing to some, you know, tailored to what you're looking for. The two companies between them is interesting. When I was coming up back in the 70s and 80s, we used to have raging debates about Reynolds versus Columbus, and I don't know if there's anybody on planet Earth who could actually tell much difference if you had the same frame with the same tubing diameters and stuff, if you could tell the difference of one versus the other.
Yeah.
They are not completely identical. They will use different types of steel. The steel originates in different places and stuff like that, but it's pretty hard to tell the difference. But Reynolds, you know, like we were to recap what we were talking about before, old company, you know, back in the UK. So this is Reynolds Steel in Sheffield, England, which is the heart of the British steel industry. In fact, if you've ever seen a Dunelt bicycle,
No.
it has a decal, and I love this decal. It's ride a wheel on Sheffield steel, which I always like that. It's pretty cool. It's kind of an obscure brand. It was part of the Raleigh stable of brands. But anyway, steel allows you a lot of design flexibility.
Okay.
You know, the industry has moved, you know, we went from steel, then to, you know, graduated to aluminum, started throwing carbon fiber main tubes, and then full-on carbon fiber. There are a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons for that is that the most powerful, I remember in a marketing class years ago, the most powerful marketing word in the English language is new. And so, hey, you don't want that old steel frame, you want the new aluminum, or you don't want that steel or aluminum, you want the new carbon fiber.
Okay.
You know, kind of sort of blowing through, you know, what are the good characteristics of each material, because they all three have really good things about them. So we're not saying don't buy that, buy this.
Sure.
We're saying steel has some great characteristics about it that I find very attractive, and a lot of other people do. But hey, you can buy whatever bike you want to.
Oh yeah.
Reynolds, again, out of the UK. I think they date back to the 30s. Started Reynolds 531 tubing was, you know, as I was growing up, was, you know, aspired to it. In fact, I think I had T-shirts with the Reynolds tubing sticker that said "Guaranteed built with Reynolds 531," which, you know, talks about the combination of alloys used to make the steel. And then they started, as time passed, they came out with like 753 and 853, and then I'm trying to remember the top of the range. And for them, is they have a titanium tubing as well.
Titanium as well as stainless steel too.
Yes.
For the current, yeah.
Yeah. Stainless steel for sure. If I got to look again, I should be checking. Columbus comes out of the Italian steel industry, which is in the northern part of Italy. That's the
Okay.
So around actually around the Venice area, Milan, around there. That is the industrial heart of Italy, and they have been around forever. They've, you know, got a beautiful range of tubing. You know, I don't think there's any real, I wouldn't tell buy one versus the other. But they have that whole thing where they start with, you know, kind of a chromoly tubing all the way up to, you know, stainless and into titanium range.
Okay.
And then there are other brands, you know, at the same time, like Trek, we had some tubing. There's one brand called Ishiwata, which I'm not sure if they're still around.
Okay.
Another was Tange, or Tange, Tange tubing, which is, you do see that fairly common, like some of the cool old bikes around there. Some of the brands of tubing, like Richie tubing, I think he's working with one of those Japanese brands, I believe.
Oh, okay.
You know, he's got his, you know, picks alloys, picks wall thicknesses, stuff like that. And Richie tubing is beautiful stuff. In fact, I think you were lusting after.
Yeah, I used to have a classic Richie tubing made under Mongoose, but that's when I was really got my first bite or ride on the steel frame, and realized before it was all just aluminum, and actually put, you know, rubber to the dirt roads and mountain bike raced on it.
Yep.
It was a completely different ride in the sense that it felt more comfortable. And part of that could be just the geometries too between different brands, but and that's another factor too. I mean, like you were saying before, to like back in the day, you wouldn't get the same geometry frame unless that company made a Reynolds and a Columbus tubing side by side. So you never would really, because they were probably debating like, well, this particular geometry tube might feel a little bit better and different, and that would muddle the waters between how the two materials mix and so forth. But yeah, Richie was and still is making frames, and I still see Richie's, you know, around.
They came out. There's some just absolutely gorgeous bikes. So Tom Ritchie has been waving the steel flag for, you know, quite some time. You know, and other brands, if you remember Bridgestone, so you guys might be familiar with Bridgestone tires, but there actually were Bridgestone bicycles, and still are in Asia. They were sold here in the States up until the 80s, I believe.
Okay.
And they were definitely waving the steel frame flag, like, you know, don't leave this, you know, it's really a great frame tubing.
Okay.
So a couple key takeaways is, if you see a Specialized frame with a Columbus tube, so Specialized did the design, Columbus supplied the tubing to Specialized recommendations. The same thing happened when I was at Trek. Trek, we had great engineers, Keith Von Huben, or no, Keith is there now actually, excuse me, Brad Wagner or somebody like that did the frame designs, and then we supplied that to Reynolds, saying here's what we want out of that for the Le Mans frames.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it works. The things that lead you to a material, there are different ride characteristics. The main thing that's sold in bike shops from one versus the other is lightweight. The thing I would always do if I knew a bike was light, you came in to buy a bike and said, hey, pick that thing up. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because that's something anybody can understand, whether they're in the bike business or not. And lightweight typically it is a great thing. I mean, particularly here in Colorado, as you're trying to drag a bike up to Horsetooth or something like that. So there is a good thing about lightweight, but there's also more to it than that. The frames ride differently.
Yeah.
Steel tubing in general will give you a more forgiving ride.
Okay.
It will weigh a little bit more typically than, if you're talking apples to apples, because there's different grades of aluminum as there are different grades of steel.
Sure.
But if you're talking apples to apples, it's going to be a little bit heavier, but it's going to be basically a little bit smoother ride and have kind of in some cases, it can be more of a lively ride, which is kind of a subjective term, but that's the best I can do. As you go to aluminum, you typically can save some weight. The sort of the negative most people use with aluminum tubing is, gee whiz, that thing is harsh riding.
Stiff.
It is. They can be stiffer, but some, like that bike right over there, is a joy to ride. There are ways to mitigate that, and there are, as with steel, there is a whole range of aluminum tubing. One of the things that just reminded me, we forgot about a tubing we used at Trek quite a bit, which was True Temper.
Oh yeah.
True Temper used to supply great tubing for us. A number of bikes were built with True Temper tubing. Really good stuff. The main thing is find a good brand, that is a reputable, well-built brand, knows what they're doing with the stuff, and do you like it? Does it fit you? As we were talking earlier.
Yeah, it fits the first and foremost, and that goes to the geometry, designs, and specking, to how those frames built up from whatever brand, like the Fairlight. It's really cool. Like they have one model, one size, but they have a tall and a short. For example, we're pretty close to size, right? He has stumpy legs. I mean, I get on his bike and my seat is way low, but the handlebars are way out there. So we would take two different Fairlight frames. I mean, just to be more customized to that, and that's something you want to look into. I mean, you could do adjustments with different stem lengths and so forth, but the overall ride quality, if you get the frame to fit you a little bit better, those adjustments are usually a little lessen or aggressive. Therefore, the bike's going to feel like it was meant to be felt when you're riding it. Like you were saying, that was a great analogy. It's like you become one with your bike, like the Obi-Wan thing. You're one with your bike and it disappears underneath you, and all you worry about is the ride and the skunk you're trying to avoid, or the snake, versus the bike itself and the pain points that come with that sometimes. But yeah, that's great.
I just want to say it's Mr. Stumpy Legs to you.
Oh, I hit a nerve.
One thing also I forgot to mention earlier was there is one of the wraps against steel is corrosion.
Oh, yeah.
So some people, like in the UK, that's an issue, because if you're going to ride a bike, if you're an addicted cyclist like I am, you ride in the rain. You're just no getting around it. In the Midwest, where I'm typically spending a lot of time right now, you kind of spend a lot of time in the rain or down in the basement on the trainer.
Yeah.
But that's one of the wraps against it. However, God, I'm trying to remember the term. There is a term. There are treatments to frames, coatings. It starts with an E. Anyway, we'll have to look that up. But
sure.
I think Fairlight actually uses that. So there are anti-corrosion treatments.
Okay.
So this goes all the way within a tubing range, whether it's Reynolds or Columbus or Tongay, up to a point to where you switch their stainless steel tubing. One of the things about stainless steel is it doesn't rust.
Yes.
So that's one of the things people talk about, pluses and minuses with steel. As we're talking about that, if you're buying a vintage bike, one thing is you want to look at is, if it is an old steel frame, is corrosion an issue?
Yeah.
Because you can have a beautiful, well-built steel bike, but I remember seeing one bike that was left on a dock in Japan for months as a service guy was returning from his tour over there, and it was the most rusty thing I'd ever seen. You would want to not go to that bike.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's,
Yeah. Well, there's the treatments to the actual and manufacturing level, but also there's aftermarket treatments that we've done in shops, especially when I was in Michigan where it was really humid. And in Colorado, you don't really worry about it too much. It's pretty arid and dry. You don't have to worry about rust all that much. But there, they did a treatment called Frame Saver, and it's this spray can stuff. It's really
frame saver.
Frame Saver, and it's stinky as all hell. And it's messy and goopy, and it's this stuff right here. And the Frame Saver, you have to basically strip your frame down to just the frame. I mean, actually to this level here. This is a Bontrager steel frame, so you got to tell me what frame metal is this, which steel is this in a second. But you have to strip it down to this level, and even take the seat post out. And then you spray it inside the tubes, and you put paper towels to plug it, and you just do this whole rotating thing for a couple hours and let it sit and dry. And you gotta let it cure before you put any parts in, because I did this to my pop rod. Put the seat post in too soon, it seized it in there. So yeah, so there's a way of saving the internals of it, because that's where water will drain from mounts and so forth. You'd think, oh, it's sealed up. It's like, not really, because this one specifically, I did, and I can't really show on the camera, but you'll see some of rust scarring.
Yeah, there's some corrosion in there.
There was corrosion in there, and it was a lot worse. And I took stainless steel and all that and scraped it all out and neutralized it with vinegar. So it's okay, but if you let that rust keep going, I've seen the worst case scenario where a seat stay actually is bulging out from the corrosion portion of it. But there is a treatment to that rust, so it's not something to... It's a good inspection if you're looking at a used bike, which is this is a great segue where I wanted to talk about used versus new, because there's a lot of hidden gems out there, and the specialized one here with Columbus Tubing is one, because not a lot of people know about it. Having a nice steel frame, they made it from 2003 to 2005, and I've ridden one for a while and had a couple go through my shop. And I remember when I was working at Lee's, they were specialized dealing when these were new, and I don't think it's like the latest craze of more niche type, which steel is a little bit easier to work with and available to build custom frames and so forth. So that's where you're seeing smaller companies pop up to do steel frames. But it does go back, and you can find yourself a really cool 20-year-old-ish frame. That's if it's still in good shape, build it up with more modern componentry and have that luxury ride and still be way below $1,000. Because the Fairlights, they're great bikes, and they're modernized with disc brakes and through axles and all that good stuff. But it's, the price tag on the frame itself is like 13 to 14 or somewhere around there.
And you got to import duties.
And then you got to import duties and all that, which fluctuate. But in any case, but that's the bike that, like Kevin, he has several bikes, has been riding for a long time. He wants this, he talked about it. He's like, ooh, I want one of those, that kind of thing. He's already justified it. So he understands the cry once and ride later, enjoy your ride, versus, him and Han about it. But if you're just getting into it, or you're not ready to do that investment, which a lot of people don't, there's some really high quality, good steels out there. What particular, the Treks with the 520 Reynolds and that range within the 80s and the 90s, what would you say within like the late 90s to the early 2000s frames that that might be floating out there? There's some Bontragers for mountain bikes, obviously the Columbus tubing from the Specialized. And then, I do a lot of Le Mans, so that's been a big following of mine through you guys watching on YouTube and Facebook, where, I'll refurbish, because, I gravitate to those because I'm very familiar with them, therefore I go. Is there some other brands that would come to mind that they'll look for?
So the brands is, I'm going to back up a little bit. So one thing, if you are riding steel and you're worried about corrosion, a couple things is dry your bike off after you ride in the rain or something like that. do not park your bike next to the sprinkler. You know, basically it's time. If it's wet and you dry it, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
If you let it go, it can start to rust. So a quick thing there. Brands, I would say, everybody was building steel at one point. You know, right up until into the 80s. So you know, if you've got a brand you like, one of the bikes, you know, you talk about a 20-year-old bike. I have a 50-year-old Crescent Pepito Special in my garage, which is built out of 531 and has beautiful sets of
You
lugs
make
on
me
it.
sound old, right?
Yeah, I'm old.
Well, vintage.
Yes, but to this day, you know, brands. I think Jameis might actually still be selling Reynolds tubing frames. There's also Richie is still doing with their Richie tubing. Niner builds both, I think, gravel and mountain bike out of Reynolds tubing. And there's also been a bit of a renaissance. You know, people have kind of come back to steel. So there are a number of high-end custom builders where you can there are custom bike builders, much like, you know, a Giorgio or Armani, where you know, they've got a big name, you're going to pay for the name, and they'll build you a beautiful frame at the same time. But you can buy a lot of great steel bicycles right now. In terms of what to find out in the market, I would say I would probably stay with some of the probably Japanese, American, and British frames. The problem is there are some great French frames out there, but then you get into French tubing, or French threading, rather.
Oh, okay, yeah, bottom bracket.
So these bikes are going to have a threaded bottom bracket, so that's, which this Bontrager has a threaded BB right here.
Yeah.
And, you know, also is the headset, you know, the threaded headset there. Those are harder to find and get
For
replacement parts.
yeah.
So you kind of want to be careful with that. But I would say if you find a frame, and it's typically, you know, brand you are familiar with, or if you do some research on the internet and say, who are these guys? If it's somebody you've never heard of, might you know, and can't find information, you might back off.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun, and the things I always look at when I'm dealing with an older bike, and I've been through this process a few times, is I always put a little bit wider wheel tire combo on there. Which is one thing to look at as well, because some of the frames from the particularly 80s and 90s, the steel frames, they had really tight clearance, and you really can't do much in terms of putting a wider tire combo on there. Why I like the wider tires, actually they ride better and they roll faster, which is kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, they practically got pencil thin, or, you know, finger thin. But anyway, a little bit wider tire wheel combo and some lower gearing, which partly has to do with my age, but the other thing is it's just more comfortable, easy to ride. You shouldn't be struggling too much. So, but yeah, there's a lot of great steel bikes out there. Yeah, and we're not saying one's worse than the other. It's kind of more of what they're pretty cool. There's a lot to like about steel.
Yeah. Another thing to look at is, and this is a good question for you, is steel frames. You'll see the little sticker on there, and it says like double butted or triple butted, and usually it says main tubing. And the main tubing is essentially the top tube, the down tube, and the seat tube. My question would be is, do brands like get the sticker for like Reynolds, but they switch out the different brands in the back?
Yeah, I mean, you can do, that's one thing you can do if you're building a bike from the, you know, you're actually building it out of tubing versus like now there's all the carbon fiber bikes which pop out of a mold. So you, but you can build a bike, and there are a lot of, in fact, I was talking, I've got a Raleigh Supercourse from 1978, I think, and it has a Reynolds tubing sticker on it. It is a 531 sticker, and it, you know, 531 butted, which means, butted means that the tubing wall thickness, so the thickness of this tube, not this thickness, but the actual, this type of thickness. So double butting, what they do is towards the end of where you're welding this or brazing it, the butting allows you to thicken up the tube to protect that under the welding process or brazing process. And then you can thin it out here where, you know, until you get back to the heat affected zone. So that's
Okay.
one of the reasons they do butted frame tubing.
Gotcha.
It's a more expensive way to make steel tubing because you have to draw it. You know, there's all sorts of mandrels and things like that that are done at places like Reynolds, Columbus, Tongay that they can do. But so back to your question, if you're looking and it has that cool little Reynolds, it's kind of ugly, but in a cool way. It has a black background. I think it's got black, green, and gold combo on there, except Fairlight now has their designer Reynolds stickers that are kind of
Yeah, they're
one
own
color.
specific.
Yeah.
Special.
But you want to look for one that says full Reynolds or main tubes. So if it can have main tubes and it can still have nice chromoly tubes back here, like at Trek we use Reynolds main tubes and I think it was Ishiwata rear triangle.
Yeah, on that truck, the Trek 500, which I have a video in my library about the Trek 500 had Reynolds tubing 520, but you were talking about Tangay dropouts, and with the Tangay was the back.
Tango was the tubing. The dropouts are going to be, those would have been, I think Shimano or something, or maybe actually might have been. Actually, the Trek dropouts Trek had those designed.
Oh, okay.
So
So it could be a mix within the tubing
Yeah,
itself.
one thing if you see a Reynolds or a Columbus sticker and it says main tubes, and you want to know it's a higher end frame, typically the dropouts will be a forged dropout like this. So forged dropout it looks finished better than a stamped steel dropout.
Okay.
They're stiffer, they're longer lasting. If you see a forged dropout, that is one of the indicators of a little bit higher quality steel frame. And that's both at the back end of the bike and also would be on the fork tips as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looking at the older frames when you go out there and you go shopping, a couple of the brands I wanted to mention that we forgot is Univega. They had some steel frames, which I sold a couple of those with I think it was the 853 or it was one of the Reynolds ones. I remember the badge, and it did say main tubes on that, and the other one was Bianchi.
Yeah.
And
lots of Bianchis.
And the Bianchis I've been seeing they don't have the Italian threaded bottom right. They're just a standard thread. So you can still upgrade those to whatever your more standardized fitting pieces, so you can get more, whatever. This particular one's unique because it was in the vintage area where they did a 1-inch head tube. Which some of the roads you got to watch out for. The older ones will be a 1-inch. You can still get headsets and forks for them, but you're just going to be more limited for that. But so what you're looking for is more of an 1 1/8 inch headset portion.
What you're talking about is this measurement here.
The spacing of where the
diameter.
Diameter of the actual head tube. But a lot of the bottom racket threadings. Pretty standard. There's a lot of parts, used parts. You can really build it up and customize it. So looking at, I find gyms once in a while, and the Jameis one is a good one. I have a video on that. I think it was a 500 series Reynolds, and it had a cool chrome style finish on it. And that was, it was a tank. It was a beast. But, it rode well. it rode nice. But, then again, you're riding bikes and you're doing it for a workout. So, come on.
Well,
Set all the, joking aside between, gram shaving and so forth. And it's usually, are you having a smile on your face when you're riding? And like you said before, your bike basically becomes one or melts underneath you, and you're not even thinking about it. And that's it. Those experiences when you're riding are just, priceless. And since the Richie mountain bike frame, the Team SX model blue, I have a picture of myself around here somewhere riding it. Now I'm riding the Pop Rod Le Mans, and it has. And you were asking me well, does it have the Reynolds or does it have the True Temper? And it's the True Temper one, which True Temper is no longer making.
I think True Temper
is done.
True Temper is done almost completely. I don't think there's any manufacturing of anything True Temper, shovels or anything. I think now it's a brand with stuff sourced in Asia. Yeah. But they've been out of the bike tubing business for 20 years or something.
Gotcha. I have True Temper shovels. I bought them because it said True Temper.
That's
for
cool.
snow shovels.
Yeah.
But anyway, so even up to the more, now that's a 20-year-old bike. Count my my days. But that ride, even though it was a good 10 years after that Richie experience, that True Temper pop rod gravel bike just cuts like butter. It rides great on off-road terrain, which a lot of people were, and the newer bikes. And this is where, okay, so we're going to talk about the new steel versus old steel. Old steel, you're going to have a little bit of limitations on tire widths, because for road bikes specifically, for sure, because they don't have discs to open up the areas to accommodate wider tires. So you are a little bit limited there. There are tires out there that can get more of a gravel kind of feel to it. Like Continental makes an inverted tread and so forth like that. But the other part of the newer versions are the disc brakes. So if you're looking for, like, the trends where cyclocross was specifically a cyclocross bike, it was like the beginning of the gravel series, but what gravel has turned into is almost like 3 different kind of bikes within the gravel genre now. You got like your roadie gravel, you have like your do-it-all gravel, then you have like your fat bike-ish tire for off-road riding, and then you have your touring gravel.
It reminds me so much of mountain biking, because at one point mountain bikes, there was like, a clear recipe for a mountain bike, one thing, and all of a sudden it became, downhill, cross country, whatever. And the same thing is happening with gravel.
Yeah.
And actually, I think part of the current somewhat of a renaissance for steel is because of the ride with steel. Because it does give, it will absorb more energy. Given the same frame design, the steel is going to have a kind of a better ride versus typically an aluminum. Carbon they can do a lot with. But one thing I was going to say, kind of going back to some French threading and 1-inch diameter stuff, there's a couple of resources when I'm looking for stuff like that. Velo Orange is one website you can go to.
That's right.
There's Rivendell, and Rivendell is Grant Peterson, which going back, Grant was the product manager at Bridgestone USA, and he was waving that steel flag way into the as we got into aluminum and carbon fiber, and he basically is now doing whatever he wants to with Rivendell components and bicycles, and they're all steel.
Yeah, they're out of San Francisco or Portland.
Portland,
okay,
yeah.
Nice.
Portland, and then I think Velo Orange is, I think, out of Connecticut to the East Coast or something like that. But both kind of fun sites that can kind of lead you down the steel frame rabbit hole.
Yeah, you can really, and the beauty of some of those frames, like the craftsmanship of the welds or the brazing and the, I know there's, I think, a place down in Arizona where you can pay a good chunk of money to build your own steel frame, which would be kind of a fun experience to do. And you spend a couple weeks down there, and they teach you how to weld it up, and they have all the tubing and all that. And that'd be kind of a fun, like, guys or former mechanics week vacation to build some frames. But that'd be kind of fun. But well, so looking at the older vintage, I mean, not the 70s and 80s vintage, but when you're looking at more of the 90s, late 90s, early 2000 vintage, different levels of vintage now. But you can get like something like this Elite from Specialized, or a Univega, or a Jameis, and you'll see they'll pop up, and a lot of people just kind of look it over and like, oh, this is a steel frame, but it's actually a hidden gem. Especially, well, Le Mans have a little bit of a stronger name to it, but a lot of their bikes are steel. So they get into a good steel starting off bike. That's a great way to go. But when you're looking at new, I mean, been at the bike show, and Niner, they're out of Fort Collins. They're still making the steel frame out of Reynolds, and I kind of drooled all over that. Kind of made a little wet mess there at the show. And then there was Breezer. They were there, and they had some very classic steel frames as well. And then looking at other, like having the experience of Kevin dropping off 2 bikes. One was the Tumbleweed, which is more of that
mountain bike kind
a gravel mountain bike Tundra bike. I mean, the thing was awesome.
Yeah.
He's a big guy, so it was like a praying mantis. I mean, the thing was huge, but it was pretty cool.
Kevin or the bike?
Oh, well, both. Yeah, whatever.
Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry, Kevin. And then he brought in that Fairlight, which definitely, and they're both brand new. I mean, they're being built up, and that Fairlight just blew me away. I mean, just looking at the ovalized tubing and so forth, and you can just really do some cool stuff. And having this new insurgent of, if you're gonna spend $4,000 on a bike, I'd have something that has external cables that you can work on it. Not to say that internal's horrible, but as a mechanical portion of it is a nightmare. But when you're looking at just like classic or the feel of the ride, I mean, for me, I would definitely go down that kind of road. Reason being is I don't want to pull a Trek or a Specialized right out of the rack, pay another $1,000 for fitting pieces to make sure it rides right for me, and then I'm seeing somebody else that has the same bike on the bike path kind of thing versus something really unique and that kind of deal. So I'm at that kind of level of age.
I think kind of the bottom line here is that we're not necessarily steel is better. It's more of a preference. Once you ride it, you might love it. Or on the other hand, you might go, man, I want something lighter, whatever.
Yeah.
So it just, don't overlook steel, but you don't have to buy it. We just like steel.
There's some really cool, I love steel, but there's really cool aluminum frames.
Yeah.
Klein was one.
Oh, yeah.
Really, some really cool stuff there. And there's some really decent carbon bikes out there too. But if you go with the classics, yeah, for sure. Oh, we got some questions here. So, hey, Tim, thanks for joining in. Tim actually bought a couple bikes from me. He's a normal, regular, cool guy. And he always makes jokes when I say Parker Bikes or, because apparently I say it a lot. Because, that's where I came from.
Yep.
Jason, thank you for chiming in. Good topic, and glad to catch this live. I have steel bikes from the 80s and 90s, no modern steel bikes. So I'm enjoying the conversation. Awesome. Thank you for listening in. Oh, Randy, Randy's another guy that always chimes in. Late, steel is real. Yeah. There's SA had a question. Has any bike companies done hydroforming with steel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So hydroforming.
School me on hydroforming, number one, and how they do it with
that's
steel.
It's an amazing technology. So when you think about steel tubing and you're basically drawing it, pulling it, and there's these mandrels that fit inside a tube that you'll pull and get different butt lengths and stuff like that. Butt as in butting.
Butting, not the butt of the joke.
Hydroforming, instead of kind of you put the steel into a mold and you force in at high pressure hydraulic, I believe they use an oil, and it basically kind of plasticizes steel at that point.
Really?
And hydroforming is pretty cool. You can do it with both aluminum and steel.
Did Klein do that with their tubing? Because I remember they were talking about the Kool-Aid back in the 90s when the Klein rep would come in and was talking about like hot oil bath and drawing tubing, aluminum tubing, and so forth.
Hot oil, he was probably talking about hydroforming.
Okay.
But it's pretty cool. Like when you see a bike, because back in the day with this, when this Specialized was built, it was not as available out there. Because there's a big investment for people to go to hydroforming. But it does. One of the cool things that a company like Fairlight is they have moved steel into the modern age. This is what you can do with it now. We can hydroform it. We can do this to make some really cool tubing shapes that before the technology wasn't there for that. So steel has been updated. So yeah, hydroforming is definitely a part of it. That's a great question.
Do you know anybody that's doing hydroforming?
Fairlight, I think, is one.
Okay.
Because
their tubing was really crazy on the rear triangle.
Yeah.
It was like, usually just see like bended straight tubing and maybe a little bit of tapering, but this was like ovalized, and then it changed like three different directions as it went up to the actual seat tube.
I'm drawing a blank route out there, but that's just, I hadn't really thought about it before, who's hydroforming and who isn't. But I think most people, if you're like me, I got excited about that technology in terms of what it can do to bring steel into the current day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good question.
It's a great material, and you can actually manipulate it Great question. Thanks, Essay, for. All right, Tim. Richie tubing. Oh yeah, Richie Logic tubing. That's what it was.
Yep.
It's nice and smooth steel. Yeah, I'm still looking for that mountain bike. I just why did I sell that? But it dinged pretty easily though.
Yeah.
So it'd be great for a road. But anyway, not to say there's anything bad about it. Oh yeah, another one to talk about is Waterford. Randy, thank you for reminding me of that. I guess someone brought up Waterford Bikes, and now Colorado. Yeah, Waterford, that was in a news topic, but there's a history with Waterford. Waterford goes back to Schwinn, right?
Yeah, so the roots of Waterford go all the way back to the Schwinn Paramount.
Right.
And the genesis of the Schwinn Paramount, so I'm going way back.
Yeah.
Ignaz Schwinn, the founder of Schwinn Bicycles, building bikes in Chicago.
Okay.
He, was a German immigrant. He came over here and started building bikes. And the bike market here in the United States, there actually was an adult bike boom in the 1890s, which was amazing. Like, it was such a phenomenon. They were everywhere. It was a women's liberation thing because a woman did need some guy to saddle a horse or whatever for her or whatever.
Yeah.
All sorts of things there. But anyways, after that boom kind of subsided and people started falling in love with cars, the bike market just became kids. And Ignaz kept remembering, gee whiz, back in Europe, adults still ride bikes.
Yeah.
And so he said, the way I'm going to do it, he hired a frame builder, Otto Waston. In Chicago, and you can still go to, I think the Waston dealership is still there, and they've got beautiful old Paramounts.
Wow.
But they were building, he was trying to get adults riding bicycles in the United States. And he hired people there. There's kind of some cool Schwinn advertising. We were talking about the anniversary the other day, but
Yeah.
Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, people like that are in these ads, trying to get adults. It didn't really work anyway, so that's where the Paramount came from. So the Paramount, instead of being the factory, was actually a workshop of hand-built Schwinns, Paramount. Okay. And then when Schwinn went bankrupt, I think the first time, they've gone through 3 now. None of them my fault, but
well, that was the 90s one. I remember we had some Paramount, like the PG something, 70, 80, 90.
Paramount Design, PDG, Paramount Design Group.
Okay. And
so in fact, they were the ones that, they were one of the first bigger brands that went to a larger diameter headset and bottom bracket.
That's right.
So they were doing some cool things there. When Schwinn went down in flames, they basically, Richard Schwinn, one of the Schwinn family, bought it with the guy who had headed the Paramount Design Work Group, and they were in Waterford, Wisconsin already. They said that Paramount needs to be away from Schwinn in Chicago, so it was already there in Waterford, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So they pulled basically the Paramount Design Group became Waterford.
Yeah.
And they were cranking along. Gosh.
Wasn't that like a cousin of Schwinn bought it underneath the bankruptcy?
No, it was Richard Schwinn.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, the head of Paramount Design Group.
When was this?
It was right after the first bankruptcy.
Or what year? Ish.
Oh.
Was that 80s?
Late 80s or?
So I remember the 90s.
Late 80s or early 90s.
Okay. All right.
Maybe early 90s.
And then Richard Schwinn.
There's actually a really good, hard to find book about this. Boy, we're really getting off track. Called No Hands, that talks about Schwinn's history. But anyway, so Paramount was this thing there. They became Waterford. Waterford kept going. The steel bike market started to die off, the high-end steel market for people like Waterford. And also, I think, probably within the Schwinn family, I don't know if there weren't, younger Schwinns. There are younger Schwinns around in the United States, but I don't think anybody was there with the wherewithal or desire to keep the Waterford brand going. Okay. So that actually got shut down. So recently, they're in Durango now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, They whoever was running Waterford, there was an announcement in Bicycle Retailer about a year ago, like we're done, or maybe 6 months ago. Right. It's like more recent, like we're done, we're going to be closing up, and seeing them being reboot, or not necessarily reboot, but switched over.
Yeah. It's the people who build Dean, and I'm trying to
Is this the Dean
Segrist?
people down
Yeah.
in Durango? Okay.
Yeah, so
Nice.
they have two, and it's Abracadabra or something is one of the names.
Yeah,
Kind
one of the
interesting.
brands I didn't recognize at
Anyways,
all.
they are now reestablished. The Waterford brand is now here in beautiful Durango, Colorado, near and dear to my heart because I used to work for a Schwinn dealer,
Yeah.
the outdoorsman at the Elk on Main in Durango.
Nice.
But that's
That was a
pretty
party
cool.
college town, right?
Pardon?
That was a party college town, right?
We actually, interesting thing, we actually
I got this.
PO'd CU because our business school was rated better than the CU business school for a period during the 70s, I think, maybe into the 80s. Don't mess with Fort Lewis, pal.
Hands off.
I think I might be running up
But-
against my time.
Yeah, we're gonna be. Unfortunately, we're gonna have a hard stop up here today, guys, because we both have things. Well, he was gonna go ride his bike,
Yep.
and my wife has me on a short leash. Let's see here. Yeah, Waterford. Thank you for bringing that up. We'll probably talk about Waterford in an episode specifically because there's a lot of rich history. Yes, 3D. Can they do 3D printing with steel? Do you know yet, or?
Actually, my gut.
That's Tony's.
So I don't know this for a fact, but my gut, I think so. I think I don't think it's like your typical 3D printer that you buy at Best Buy or something like that.
It's like the newer version of the CNC versions of that kind of thing.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
That we didn't give a very good answer to, but anyway.
Yeah.
We think so.
Hopefully today you got some great insights. If you're watching this on replay, please comment below if you have any experience with steel frames yourself or looking for steel frames or any of that kind of nature. I've had some people was having this hanging around. People I was like, I seen one of those in my neck of the woods. I'm like, oh yeah, jump on that, that kind of thing. And we did run out of time. We do have we'll do a little teaser here before you leave.
Yep.
He dropped off this bike for me to work on, and he worked at Schwinn when it's the third owner, second owner, Questor,
who shall no longer be named.
Is the Schwinn Fastback, and just did a complete tune-up on this guy, stripped it down and all that. But this is a little bit of a teaser. He was part of the design group of this particular frame before Schwinn is now owned by Pon. I don't know. I think they got bought by somebody else in between.
Yeah.
But Pon Holdings. But this was actually made in the United States.
Our vendor for the frames was Anodizing Inc. out of Portland, Oregon, who actually makes, their big business is window frames for skyscrapers, aluminum window frames for skyscrapers.
Wow, crazy.
They also made some cool stuff, some, way beyond it. But they, we were talking about working with a vendor like Reynolds or Columbus. They were doing all sorts of fun stuff. This has some pretty complicated tubing shapes. If you, like the top tube, gets ovalized towards the head tube and rounds out here, and more stuff going on at the bottom bracket. So it was really fun. It was a great project. It was kind of like when we started it, it's kind of like your dad tossing you the keys to the vet. It's like I get to start, and it was really fun doing this. This is an aluminum frame set here, which is a great riding aluminum frame. This is one of the things we can talk some point about, good aluminum frames versus, things that ride like a brick. But this is a blast to ride, in my humble opinion. But yeah, that's our tease today.
There we go. Well, stay tuned. And again, thanks for hanging out.
Yep.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
Staying here for a little bit of time. We'll
Thanks
try
for
to,
this. This is amazing.
Yeah, we'll get that all going. We'll do a little fitting too. In any case, thanks for hanging out with me. I have a description. Please, if you have any, added insights and so forth, this is a community. It makes you to make this channel. Please comment below. Thanks for hanging out with in Garage.
Yeah.
If it's beautiful in your neck of woods, please go for a ride.
Yeah, ride your bike.
Go for a ride. Oh, you're gonna have a tailwind or a headwind.
Yes, both. Yes to both.
Yes. Well, again, thanks, guys. Sorry, a little bit shorter today, but again, if it's Tuesday, it's Shop Talk Tuesday, and I'll see you next time.
Adios. All right, I'm going to use your restroom. Is that all right?